What happens when a calm, respectful black teen girl asks for something as simple as orange juice and is instead met with public humiliation by the very crew meant to serve her 17-year-old Sierra Brooks boarded her flight with quiet excitement, headed to a new city to begin a new chapter in life. But just 30 minutes after takeoff, everything changed. A flight attendant's cold stare, a false accusation, and then a voice raised not in rage, but in quiet resolve. Why did her request trigger such a violent overreaction? What really happened at 35,000 feet that forced the captain to ground the plane? And who is Sierra Brooks? This teenage girl who somehow turned one humiliating moment into a movement that shook an entire airline. This is not just a story about race. It's a story about dignity, silence, courage, and the cost of speaking up when the world expects you to shrink. Stay with us, because by the end, you won't just remember Sierra's name. You'll carry her voice with you. If stories like this matter to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The moment it happened, the cabin fell silent. Who do you think you are? The voice cut through the recycled air like a blade. Sharp, measured, weaponized. Passengers froze mid-motion. The man 3 rows up stopped tapping on his laptop. A woman halfway through sipping ginger ale paused with the can halfway to her lips. All eyes slowly turned toward the source of the voice. Seat 26F. Sierra Brooks sat rigid, her seatbelt still fastened across her waist. Her curls, neatly gathered in a low puff, trembled slightly with her shoulders. The sudden attention pressed against her like cabin pressure during a rapid descent. Her eyes lifted slowly toward the woman standing just feet away from her seat, arms stiff, posture locked like a warning siren. It was the lead flight attendant, Cynthia Harrow. Sierra hadn't even said anything just yet. Her question had been simple, calm, something about the bathroom and seatbelt sign. But Cynthia's reaction hadn't matched the moment. And now, 32 passengers stared at her like she had committed a felony mid-flight. "I asked you a question, young lady," Cynthia repeated, enunciating each syllable with practiced disdain. "What did you just say to me?" Sierra blinked, trying to anchor herself. Her throat was dry. Her chest tightened beneath her favorite denim jacket. The collar suddenly felt too snug. Every part of her wanted to disappear, or rewind, or run. But she didn't. Instead, her hand moved, slowly, precisely, like she was defusing a bomb. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. One tap, then another, and then another. A single name appeared at the top of the screen. Dad. Her thumb hovered for less than a second before she pressed the call icon. The phone began to ring. A few nearby passengers exchanged glances. Some were confused. Others looked away in discomfort. But most were watching her like this was a courtroom drama they hadn't paid to see, yet couldn't stop watching. The line connected. "Sierra." His voice was steady, warm, familiar. Just hearing it slowed the pulse rushing in her ears. "Dad," she said, her voice low but clear. "I need your help. Something's happening." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "You're not allowed to use your phone during flight. You need to turn that off." Sierra ignored her. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice stayed even. She had learned that from him. Never match escalation with escalation. Just breathe and speak. "The flight attendant is yelling at me in front of everyone. She wouldn't let me use the restroom. I think it's because I'm black." Gasps. 1, 2, maybe 3. Audible. Real. From passengers seated nearby. Cynthia's face shifted from authoritative to stunned. For a second, she looked like someone had just slapped her. "That is absolutely not true," Cynthia barked, the strain in her voice rising. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing?" But Sierra didn't flinch. She held the phone closer to her cheek, nodding slightly as her father spoke. "I understand. Dad, yes. The flight number is 782 heading to Atlanta. I'm in seat 26F. By now." Another flight attendant had arrived, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a crew badge that read Mark Langston. He looked confused, concerned. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's being completely disrespectful and accusing me of discrimination." Cynthia snapped before Sierra could speak. Mark turned to Sierra, his expression more open, less reactive. "Miss, are you okay?" Sierra nodded. "I'd like you to speak with my father. Please." She extended the phone. Mark hesitated, glanced at Cynthia, then took it carefully. "This is Mark Langston, flight staff on board Delta 782. Yes, sir. Yes. I understand. She's safe. Just shaken. No. She's not being physically threatened. I'll notify the captain right away." He handed the phone back. Sierra's father was still on the line. "I'm okay. Dad," she whispered, just embarrassed. "You did the right thing." "Sierra," he said, "you stood your ground. I'm already contacting Delta and FAA protocol. Stay calm. I love you." The call ended, and for a moment, there was just the hum of the engines. Nothing else. No one moved. No one spoke. Sierra placed the phone gently in her lap, her fingers curled around it like a shield. The older woman sitting in the aisle seat next to her leaned in and whispered, "You handled that with grace, baby. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Sierra nodded, but her insides were twisting. She felt hot and cold all at once. This wasn't how the flight was supposed to go. She had been excited that morning. Nervous, yes, but excited. Her first solo flight. Her first step into college life, into adulthood. This wasn't supposed to happen. She tried to steady her breath, staring out the window at the endless stretch of clouds. What if this spiraled out of control? What if she'd made a mistake? What if people thought she was just another angry teenager looking for trouble? A quiet part of her mind whispered, "But what if you weren't wrong? What if this is what standing up looks like? What if this moment matters more than you think?" Suddenly, Mark returned. He knelt beside her seat. "Miss Brooks," he said softly, so only a few rows could hear. "The captain would like to speak with you in private. Would that be all right?" She nodded. Her hands were still shaking as she unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, trying not to see all the eyes watching her, trying not to hear the whispers, trying not to feel the doubt curling in her chest like smoke. She followed Mark up the narrow aisle toward the cockpit. Each step forward echoed with the weight of something much bigger than orange juice. The sunlight was just beginning to warm the eucalyptus trees lining the streets of Emeryville when Sierra Brooks awoke before her alarm. It was that kind of quiet morning where everything feels suspended, like the world knows something significant is about to happen. She blinked up at the ceiling of her bedroom, her eyes tracing the faint glow of soft daylight spilling in from the blinds. Today was the day she would board her first solo flight. Today she would leave California and fly to Atlanta. Today, she would start becoming the version of herself she had always imagined. But her stomach churned. Sierra sat up slowly, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her room was tidy, the way her father liked to say, "A clear room equals a clear mind." A neatly folded pair of black leggings and her favorite vintage Spellhouse sweatshirt waited on the chair. Her white sneakers sat beside them, clean and double-knotted from last night. Everything was ready, except maybe her, downstairs. She could hear the gentle clink of dishes and the low hum of jazz floating from the kitchen speaker. Her father's morning routine was as reliable as sunrise. Sierra dressed quietly, then paused at her mirror. Her skin glowed against the soft gray of the sweatshirt. She pulled her hair back into a single low puff, sprayed the edges, and gave herself one long look. "You've got this," she whispered. But even she wasn't sure if she believed it. By the time she came down, the scent of toasted bread and black coffee filled the house. Her father, Dr. Nelson Brooks, stood at the granite island countertop, stirring honey into his mug, tall and broad-shouldered, with glasses slipping halfway down his nose. He looked like the exact blend of college professor and former high school linebacker he actually was. The corners of his mouth lifted when he saw her. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He handed her a plate with toast and sliced avocado arranged with almost comical precision. Sierra took a bite to be polite, but didn't finish it. Her nerves sat too close to the surface. "I packed your vitamin gummies in the front pouch of your backpack," he added, sipping his coffee. "Also, your boarding pass is saved in both Apple Wallet and email." I triple-checked. "Dad." She smiled. "You know I'm not 5. Right." He raised a brow. "Today you might as well be. First flight alone. I reserve the right to hover." She rolled her eyes but felt a rush of warmth all the same. It had always been the two of them, ever since her mom left when Sierra was 9. Not in some tragic, dramatic exit, but in a slow unraveling that ended in a clean break. Since then, her father had been both anchor and sail, holding her steady while pushing her forward. "You sure you don't want me flying out with you?" he asked. Not for the first time. Sierra hesitated, her hands tightening around the edge of the kitchen island. "You need to be with Aunt Rhonda at the hospital. I'll be fine. It's just a flight." "She had another scan this morning," he said softly. "They think it's spreading." Sierra's heart sank. "Does she know she suspects?" A long silence stretched between them. Sierra felt her throat tighten, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of life shifting faster than she could keep up. "I'll visit her when I get back," she said. "I'll make her laugh." Nelson reached out and gave her shoulder a squeeze. She'd like that. "And Sierra, about the flight. If anything feels off, you call me. I don't care if it's turbulence, rude seatmates, whatever. You trust your instincts. You don't have to accept being treated like less than you are. Ever." "I know," she whispered. "No, I mean it." His voice deepened, especially when people in uniforms use their authority in ways they shouldn't. "You have every right to speak up." "Every right." Sierra nodded, but part of her wished he hadn't said it. It made the world feel heavier again. She glanced at the digital clock on the microwave. It was 7:46 Mo. Her flight wasn't until 11:15, but they had always been an arrive super early kind of family. He was driving her to LAX, even though it meant fighting through morning freeway chaos, just to make sure she got through security. He said it was to make sure she didn't forget her laptop, but they both knew he just wanted those last few moments before she boarded. 30 minutes later, the car was loaded and backing out of their driveway. Sierra watched the front of their house grow smaller in the rearview mirror. Her backpack sat on her lap, hands gripping the straps like a lifeline. Nelson had Thelonious Monk playing softly over the car speakers. It wasn't the music of goodbye, but of stillness, reflection. Traffic was brutal. It always was on I-405, especially with construction zones popping up like whack-a-moles. Still, they reached the terminal by 9:30. He pulled into the drop-off lane at Terminal 4 and shifted into park. "I could walk you in," he offered, voice gentle. "No," she said quickly. "I need to do this alone." He gave her a long, searching look, then got out to help her unload the suitcase. When everything was set on the curb, he pulled her into a hug. Not too tight, not too long, but long enough. "Move with purpose," he said, like a mantra. "Move with purpose," she echoed. Then she turned, wheeling her bag toward the sliding doors, not daring to look back. Inside the terminal, the world shifted. Crowds surged like tides. Announcements echoed overhead, and the smell of pretzels and jet fuel mixed in the air. Sierra paused just long enough to breathe. She was here, alone, and she wasn't going to mess it up. She followed signs for baggage drop, then security. Each checkpoint she passed felt like a small victory. When the TSA officer waved her through without even a second look, she allowed herself a quiet smile. By the time she reached her gate, B-27, it was only ton, one, oh, oh. She found a seat near the window and plugged in her phone. Her thumbs tapped out a message to her father. Made it through security. At gate. Not crying. Yet. A second later, he responded, "Proud of you. Cry if you want. Still proud." She set the phone down, leaned back in the molded plastic seat, and let herself people watch. Business travelers in tailored suits, families juggling strollers and juice boxes, a teenage couple holding hands like a lifeline. Everyone was going somewhere. Everyone had a story. She pulled out her notebook, an old habit from years of journaling, and began to sketch the scene in words. 2 gates over. A flight to Houston boarded early. The overhead speaker crackled with boarding announcements. A toddler wailed somewhere in the background. A man in a neck pillow was already asleep before takeoff. Sierra's nerves settled. For a moment, it felt like just another day, just another trip. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a quiet thought lingered. Not quite fear, not quite certainty, just a whisper. Please let this be uneventful. She would remember that thought later, the way one remembers the quiet, just before a storm. Sierra stood in line at the gate, trying to stay calm as the crowd around her shifted with impatient feet and the buzz of half-awake conversations. She had already triple-checked her boarding pass, tucked neatly into the front pocket of her hoodie. Her suitcase handle dug gently into her palm as she leaned slightly against it, not from fatigue, but to ground herself. Boarding was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. She had time to breathe, time to overthink. Across the room, a woman in a navy blue Delta uniform approached the gate podium with practiced grace. She checked the intercom, flipped through a clipboard, and then smiled the kind of smile that never quite touched her eyes before picking up the microphone. "Good morning, passengers of Delta Flight 782 with nonstop service to Atlanta. We'll begin pre-boarding shortly. Please ensure your boarding group is listed on the app or printed pass." Sierra's phone buzzed softly in her hand. A text from her best friend. "Rena, you on the plane yet?" She typed back quickly. "Not yet. At the gate. Kinda nervous." The reply came fast. "You got this. Just don't fall asleep and miss boarding like last time." Sierra smiled. She started typing a response, but a voice beside her caught her attention. "First solo flight." The question came from a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a green fleece jacket. His hair was salt and pepper, and his carry-on had a Stanford Law sticker on it. "Yeah. Is it that obvious?" He chuckled. "You keep checking your boarding pass like it's going to change." She laughed, embarrassed. "Is it that bad it's that human?" he said with a shrug. "First times are allowed to feel big. But you'll be fine. Atlanta Sierra nodded. College orientation? Let me guess. Spelman? She blinked, surprised. How did you know my niece goes there? Class of 24. You've got good taste. Sierra smiled, her nerves calming slightly with the kindness of a stranger. The boarding line began to shift, and the loudspeaker crackled again. Now boarding our first-class passengers and Delta One members. That's me, the man said with a small wave. You're going to be great. Enjoy the ride. Thanks. He moved toward the front of the line, and Sierra watched him disappear down the jet bridge. The small interaction left her feeling a little lighter. Eventually, Group 4 was called. Sierra grabbed her bag handle and rolled forward, pulling up her phone with the boarding pass ready. Her heart pounded a little harder with each step, but she moved with purpose, just like her father said. She kept her shoulders back and her breath even. The gate agent scanned her phone and gave her a brief nod. Have a nice flight. The jet bridge smelled faintly of jet fuel and air conditioning. Sierra walked slowly, following the woman in front of her who was balancing a Starbucks cup and an overstuffed tote bag. At the aircraft door stood 2 flight attendants. The first was a young black woman, no more than 30, with tightly braided hair pulled back in a bun. Her name tag read, Tess. She smiled at each passenger like it wasn't forced, like she meant it. Welcome aboard. Sierra smiled back. Thanks. Next to her stood an older white woman, tall and slender, with clipped blonde hair and a uniform that fit her like it had been custom tailored. Her name tag read Cynthia. Her eyes were blue, cool, and quick. She didn't smile. Sierra gave her a polite nod, but Cynthia didn't return it, just watched her for a moment too long. Sierra looked away and stepped into the cabin. The plane was already half full. Passengers were shoving bags into overhead bins, bumping elbows, navigating the narrow aisle with quiet frustration. Sierra checked her seat number again. Row 26, seat F, window. She moved carefully through the aisle, not wanting to draw attention, offering soft excuses as she passed slow-moving passengers. When she reached her row, the middle seat was empty, but the aisle seat was already taken by a man in his early 60s wearing a crisp golf shirt and expensive-looking watch. His face was weathered, and he had the distinct air of someone who didn't want to be disturbed. He glanced up at her but didn't move. "Excuse me." "That's my seat," she said politely, pointing toward the window. He sighed audibly and unbuckled his seatbelt, rising with a grunt that sounded more annoyed than physically strained. She stepped in quickly, placing her backpack under the seat in front of her and settling in. The window view was mostly of tarmac and cargo carts now, but the openness comforted her. She buckled her belt and pulled her hood down around her neck. The man beside her said nothing, just returned to scrolling through his phone. Sierra looked around. The flight attendants were still making their rounds. She could hear Tess a few rows up asking someone if they needed assistance with overhead storage. Her voice was clear, kind, steady. A few moments later, Cynthia passed through her row. Headphones out, belts fastened, tray tables up. She called mechanically, barely making eye contact with the passenger she addressed. When she passed Sierra's seat, her eyes lingered again, a flash of something unreadable behind them. It wasn't quite disdain, but it also wasn't warmth. Sierra turned her gaze back to the window. The last of the passengers trickled in. The cabin doors closed. The usual announcements played. Cell phones were switched to airplane mode. The aircraft began to taxi. As they rolled slowly toward the runway, Sierra felt her stomach tighten, not from fear, but anticipation. The flight was under 3 hours. She had done everything right. Everything was going according to plan. She just wanted this flight to be smooth, uneventful, ordinary. The engines roared and the plane lifted off the ground, climbing into the early afternoon sky. Sierra gripped the armrest for a second, then released it with a breath. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, passengers began adjusting their seats and removing their headphones. Some reached for books. Others pulled laptops from backpacks. She pulled out her own novel, a dog-eared copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, one of her favorites, but she didn't open it yet. Instead, she glanced down the aisle. Tess and Cynthia were rolling the beverage cart slowly through first class. Sierra tried not to watch too closely, but a small knot in her chest was already forming. She wasn't sure why. There was no reason to expect anything bad. She just had that feeling again, the one she had gotten sometimes, at stores, when security guards seemed to follow her longer than other kids, in classrooms, when teachers would double-check her work with surprise after she aced a test, the look, the tone, that subtle question in someone's face. "What are you doing here?" The plane cruised smoothly above the clouds. Nothing seemed out of place, but Sierra's fingers, resting on her book, curled just slightly. She didn't know it yet, but the moment that would change everything was only 25 minutes away. It would start with a simple request for orange juice, and it would end with the plane being forced to turn around. By the time the beverage cart neared row 26, the cabin had settled into that familiar mid-flight rhythm. Headphones were on. Shades were drawn halfway. The overhead lights cast a soft glow over dozing passengers and quietly tapping laptop keys. The hum of the engines blended with the low murmur of whispered conversations and the rustling of snack wrappers. Sierra sat still, hands folded on the open book in her lap. She had reread the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a single word. Her attention had drifted again and again toward the aisle, tracking the slow approach of the beverage cart and the women pushing it. Tess, the younger attendant, led on the left. She smiled as she passed drinks to passengers, asking each person what they'd prefer, often adding a friendly comment or light joke. Beside her, Cynthia moved methodically. She didn't make eye contact. Her tone clipped and cool. She handled the drinks like they were tasks, not interactions. Where Tess was warm, Cynthia was efficient, distant, and brisk. The contrast was impossible not to notice. 2 rows ahead, a child giggled when Tess handed him a small can of Sprite with 2 napkins folded like origami. Tess smiled back, genuinely amused. Cynthia kept her gaze forward, already reaching for the next cup. Sierra tried to reason with herself. There were different personalities in every job. Not everyone had to be sunshine. But something about Cynthia's energy felt colder than aloof. It felt familiar, a kind of chill she had known in certain teachers, some administrators, the occasional sales clerk, the kind that made you feel like you had stepped out of line without even realizing it. Sierra adjusted her seatbelt and sat up straighter as the cart reached row 25. Just ahead, the man beside her was now fully reclined, earbuds in, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken since boarding. The woman in the middle seat was still flipping pages in her novel, a legal thriller about a missing judge. Every few minutes she paused to take sips from a metal water bottle wrapped in a pink neoprene sleeve. Tess smiled at the woman in 25D. "Good afternoon. What can I get you to drink?" "Just water." "Please," the woman replied. "Ginger ale for me," said the man beside her. Tess handed over both drinks with a nod, then turned to the next row. Row 26. Tess looked at the man in the aisle seat. Hi there. What would you like, tomato juice? No ice. And for you, she asked the woman beside him. Diet Coke. Tess handed over the drinks, then turned her full attention to Sierra. And for you, Miss Sierra met her eyes and offered a small smile. Orange juice, please. Tess's smile faltered slightly. She turned to glance at the cart, then gave Cynthia a quick look. Cynthia, do we have any OJ left in this cart? Cynthia didn't look up from where she was organizing plastic cups. We're out. Apple or cranberry is what we have left. Actually, I think I saw orange juice on the other cart, Sierra said gently. I saw a few passengers get it on the left aisle a minute ago. Cynthia's head turned slowly. Her jaw was tight. If I said we're out, we're out. Apple or cranberry. Sierra paused. Her father had always taught her to speak with clarity and respect, so she kept her voice calm. I understand. I was just asking because I saw it still being served. If it's possible to check, I'd really appreciate it. Tess, sensing the sudden shift in tone, quickly interjected, I can go check the other cart real quick. It's no problem. No, Cynthia said flatly, her voice sharper now. We need to keep the service moving. We don't have time to go back and forth. Sierra's cheeks flushed. The air around her felt suddenly tight. I can wait, she said. I really don't mind. Apple or cranberry, Cynthia repeated. Louder this time. Not as a question, but as a final offer. Her voice cut through the quiet, like a thread pulled too hard. A few passengers turned their heads. The woman beside Sierra slowly closed her book. Sierra forced a breath through her nose. Water is fine, she said softly. Cynthia grabbed a plastic cup and poured with unnecessary speed. Some water splashed over the edge. She handed it over without a word and moved on. Tess lingered for half a second. I'm sorry, she mouthed, before following Cynthia to the next row. Sierra held the cup in both hands, her fingers shaking slightly. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her face neutral. A quiet voice spoke beside her. Don't take it personally, honey, said the woman in the middle seat. She was rude to the guy in the row behind us, too. Some people just shouldn't work with the public. Sierra nodded, but she didn't speak. Inside, a familiar feeling rose, that slow, sticky mix of anger and shame, the kind that left no proof, no bruises, no marks, just the weight of being made to feel small. She tried to focus on the book in her lap, but her eyes blurred the words. The scene kept replaying, her polite tone, her reasonable request. The way Cynthia's voice had gone from dismissive to hostile in seconds. Was it really about orange juice? Or was it about something else entirely Sierra had learned how to read people? Years of being the only black girl in honors classes had taught her to see what others didn't say. The slightly narrowed eyes, the tightening of lips, the way politeness turned sharp as soon as you pushed back, even slightly. She took a small sip of water. It tasted stale. Around her, the cabin returned to normal. The beverage cart rolled out of sight. The man beside her remained silent. The hum of the engines grew louder in her ears, but something had changed. She didn't know it yet, but the line had already been drawn, not in what was said, but in how it was said, and in how no one seemed to think it mattered, except her. Sierra stared out the window as clouds passed like slow-moving islands. Her fingers drummed lightly against the plastic cup in her hand, now empty. The taste of that water still lingered, bland and sharp with something unspoken. Her legs remained still, tucked neatly under her seat. Every movement from her now felt like a risk. Around her, the cabin had gone back to its quiet rhythm. Overhead, the fasten seatbelt sign remained off. Passengers had resumed scrolling phones, reading paperbacks, or tipping their heads against the vinyl cushions for brief naps. It was as if nothing had happened, but it had, and it had lodged itself somewhere deep inside her. She reached down for her phone, turning it face up on her thigh. No new texts, no notifications, just the home screen photo of her and her father from 3 months ago, standing outside the Spelman campus during their visit, his arm around her shoulder, both smiling, both whole. That version of her had never imagined a moment like this one. That version had only imagined growth and independence and becoming, not humiliation. She wasn't angry yet, not in the loud way, but something inside had begun to stretch, pull, shift. From the front of the cabin, she noticed Cynthia moving briskly toward the back of the plane, her posture sharp, her gait clipped. She stopped 2 rows behind Sierra and began speaking to a man in a business suit. Her voice was low, but her gestures carried a kind of urgency. The man nodded. Then another attendant walked toward them, quietly, deliberately. Sierra tensed. She wasn't sure why. Nothing had happened since the drink exchange, but the air felt different now, heavier. Suddenly, Cynthia turned and walked directly toward her row. "Excuse me," she said, standing over Sierra's seat. "I need to speak with you." Sierra blinked. "Me, yes. You." The woman beside her shifted uncomfortably. "Is there a problem?" Sierra asked. Cynthia crossed her arms. "We've received a report that you were confrontational during beverage service, that your tone was inappropriate, and that you refused to follow directions from the crew." Sierra's heart skipped. What Cynthia's voice rose, her eyes scanning the passengers around them. "I need you to be aware that any further disruptions may result in consequences when we land." Sierra sat stunned. She had asked for orange juice. She had asked calmly. That was all. But Cynthia was no longer speaking just to her. She was speaking to everyone within earshot, broadcasting a message, framing a story. Sierra could feel the ripple effect begin. A man 2 rows up turned slightly in his seat. A woman across the aisle gave a sidelong glance. The murmurs had begun, the subtle tilt of perception. "Excuse me," said the woman beside Sierra, her voice rising. "I was sitting right here." She wasn't confrontational. She was polite. That's a gross exaggeration. Cynthia didn't even look at her. "This matter is between flight staff and the passenger." She snapped. "Actually," the woman said, "standing now. I'm a retired school principal, and I don't like what I'm seeing. You're accusing this young woman publicly without cause. That's not just unprofessional. It's dangerous." Cynthia's face tightened. She turned away and marched back toward the front without another word. The woman sat down beside Sierra and sighed. "I'm sorry. That was out of line." Sierra nodded, eyes wide, throat tight. Her chest burned with the kind of disbelief that slowly curdles into something deeper. Her hands found her phone again. She opened the call log. Her thumb hovered over the first name in her favorites list. Dad. She pressed it. The line rang once, twice. He answered. "Hey, honey. Everything all right?" Her voice cracked. "No. Something's wrong." She explained in fragments, her voice low, but clear. She described the orange juice moment, Cynthia's tone, the public confrontation, the false report. Her father was silent for a beat. Then he spoke with calm control. "I need you to listen to me carefully. You've done nothing wrong. You're not alone. I'm going to fix this." What's the flight number? Delta 782. Heading to Atlanta. C-26F. I've got it. Stay calm. I'll be on the phone with Delta Corporate and the FAA in 5 minutes. If anyone else approaches you, stay seated, stay respectful. But record if you need to. You have rights. Sierra's eyes stung. Okay. And Sierra. Yeah, I believe you. I trust you. You are not invisible. The line disconnected. She stared at her phone for a long moment. The woman beside her placed a hand gently on her arm. That was your dad. She nodded. He sounds like a man who doesn't mess around. He's a professor and a former civil rights attorney. Well, sounds like this flight crew picked the wrong passenger to mess with today. Sierra gave a soft laugh, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. In her chest, her heart still thundered. From the front of the plane, Tess reappeared. She walked slowly toward Sierra's row and crouched beside her. I'm really sorry, she whispered. I wasn't comfortable with what Cynthia did. You didn't do anything wrong. I told the captain myself. Sierra blinked. You did. Tess nodded. He's reviewing the incident now, but I thought you should hear that from someone. Thank you, Sierra whispered. Tess stood and gave a soft smile before returning to the galley. Sierra stared down at her phone again. She didn't know what was coming next, but something had shifted. It wasn't about the orange juice anymore. It was about something much bigger, the kind of thing that begins in silence and ends in truth. The hum of the aircraft continued, steady and indifferent, as if nothing had happened, as if the quiet confrontation and the flicker of injustice hadn't rippled through the air like a crack in glass. But Sierra could feel it. The shift. It wasn't just her anymore. The woman beside her had gone back to reading, but kept glancing up, protectively now, like she was guarding something fragile. Across the aisle, 2 college-age women were whispering, their glances subtle but unmistakably pointed in Sierra's direction. One of them leaned forward and mouthed to her silently, Are you okay? Sierra nodded gently. She didn't trust her voice yet. She folded her hands in her lap and stared down at her phone. Still no new texts. Her dad hadn't written back yet, but she knew him. When he said he would handle something, he did. She could almost hear the sound of his keyboard clacking in that precise way he typed when he was focused. She imagined him sitting in his home office, framed awards and family photos on the wall behind him. His expression calm but sharp as he dialed Delta's corporate hotline and pulled up legal policy with practiced speed. He would do more than defend her. He would make sure this didn't vanish. But that didn't stop the ache that had rooted itself in Sierra's chest. That slow-burning ache of humiliation, of being misunderstood, of feeling singled out without cause. She kept turning over the moment in her head, over and over. Had she raised her voice? No. Had she been aggressive? No. She had spoken with clarity. She had asked for something every other passenger had been given, and she had done it with care. But Cynthia's words had struck like a flare. Confrontational, inappropriate tone. Disruption. Those weren't just words. Not for a girl like Sierra. Not in a world like this. They were accusations that didn't require proof. Labels that stuck with no adhesive. The kind that clung invisibly to skin and followed you into rooms before you even arrived. And now, everyone around her had been given permission to question her character, her intentions, her presence. It was something her father had warned her about. The moment where perception shifted, where someone in power rewrote the story, and suddenly, you were the problem. It doesn't matter if you're right, he had told her once. Sometimes, it only matters who gets to speak louder. She looked out the window again. The clouds stretched endlessly. Miles below them, the world moved on, but the cabin had changed. Attention hung in the air like static. Then the intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently cruising at 36,000 feet. I'd like to take a moment to remind all passengers that Delta Airlines maintains a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination or verbal aggression from either passengers or crew. If you experience or witness anything concerning, please notify a flight attendant or file a report directly through our mobile app or hotline after landing. Thank you." The voice was calm, steady, but the message wasn't routine. It was deliberate, and it made several heads turn. Sierra exhaled slowly. The captain had said something. That mattered. Maybe not to everyone, but to her. It meant the story hadn't been buried, that someone had noticed. She turned toward the woman beside her. "Did you hear that every word?" she said. "Good on him." Sierra let her gaze drift back down the aisle. She could see Cynthia standing near the galley, arms crossed. She was no longer moving with confidence. Her posture had changed. Her eyes were on the passengers now, watching more than leading. Then Tess appeared again. This time, she approached the woman across the aisle, one of the young women who had mouthed, "Are you okay?" earlier. She crouched beside her quietly and handed her a small slip of paper. The woman nodded, then turned to Sierra. "She just gave me the name of a place to report what we saw. She said we can submit statements if we want. I'm going to do it." Sierra's chest tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. "You weren't wrong," the woman said. "Some of us see it." As Tess moved through the cabin, she quietly approached others too. Not everyone, just a few. People who had been close enough to witness, close enough to hear. She didn't say much, but her eyes said everything. Something was shifting. A new current was forming. And then Sierra's phone buzzed. Her father. He had sent a screenshot of an email. The header read, "Immediate inquiry regarding conduct on Flight 782. It had been sent directly to Delta's executive response team. The email was short, but precise. It cited their code of conduct, FAA guidelines, and listed 3 witness names already submitted. At the bottom, it was signed Nelson L., Brooks J.D., Ph.D. Under that, another message followed. "I've also contacted the Department of Transportation Civil Rights Division. You'll be protected. Stay steady." Sierra stared at the screen. A strange mix of emotions surged in her chest. She was still scared, still shaken, but now, something else pulsed beneath the fear. Strength. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't alone, and she didn't have to shrink. She pulled open her notes app and began to write. Not a text, not a post, just a document, a record. She began with the moment Cynthia had handed her the water, then backtracked to the orange juice request. She wrote every word she could remember, every tone, every shift. She added times, row numbers, faces, everything. She had always been good with words, with detail. She wasn't just going to feel this moment. She was going to record it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fasten seatbelt sign turned on again as the plane began its descent. The flight was nearing its end. But something told her the real journey was just beginning. She looked around the cabin one more time. Some passengers looked restless. Others focused on putting away tablets and tightening straps. But a few made eye contact. Brief, but intentional. You're not imagining it. We saw it too. We're still watching. And Sierra sat back in her seat. Her document still open, her fingers still resting on the glass. She wasn't just a girl in seat 26F anymore. She was a witness. She was a voice. And that meant something. The first sign that something was wrong came as a whisper through the overhead speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently beginning our initial descent into Atlanta, but due to updated instructions from air traffic control, we have been advised to circle before proceeding to our final approach. We appreciate your patience and cooperation. To most passengers, the message was forgettable. A minor delay. A shrug. A reason to scroll for 5 more minutes." But Sierra caught the hesitation in the captain's voice. The way the word instructions hung in the air too long. The way final approach sounded less like a plan and more like a negotiation. She looked at the clock on her phone. They were still ahead of schedule. Barely. Yet something had shifted again. The man next to her adjusted his seat back and let out a low sigh. "Circling now? Great. I've got a connection to make." The woman beside Sierra gently tucked her book into her tote and whispered to her, "Something's happening, isn't it?" Sierra nodded slowly. "I think so." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. A few rows ahead, Tess appeared again. This time, she wasn't pushing a cart. She was walking alone, eyes scanning the cabin. She looked more serious now, more alert. She approached one of the passengers from earlier and leaned in for a hushed conversation. After a few quiet nods, she turned and made her way toward row 26 again. Sierra straightened in her seat. Tess stopped beside her, crouching gently to eye level. "Hi, Sierra. The captain has been made aware of the situation. He's in contact with ground officials and our operations team. I wanted you to know that this isn't being ignored." Sierra swallowed. "Okay. Thank you." Tess's voice softened even more. "And I wanted you to know I submitted a formal witness statement. Cynthia's behavior was inappropriate, and you deserve to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger. You handled yourself with incredible composure." Sierra's eyes stung. "That means a lot. Really?" Tess stood slowly and rested a hand briefly on the seat in front of her, steadying herself as the plane shifted gently to the left. She gave Sierra one last nod before returning to the galley. The descent continued, but the cabin remained unusually quiet. The passengers could sense the tension now, even if they didn't know what it was. It was in the way the flight attendants moved more precisely, the way Cynthia had all but vanished from view, the way the captain hadn't spoken again. The man beside Sierra removed his earbuds and looked around. "Feels off, doesn't it?" Sierra didn't reply. She just stared out the window again. The clouds were beginning to break, revealing stretches of green and gray below. Atlanta was close, but it felt far. Suddenly, the speaker clicked on again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making a temporary hold above our arrival corridor due to an operational issue that needs to be addressed before landing. The seatbelt sign will remain on. Flight crew, please secure the cabin." Passengers looked at one another, confused. What operational issue? Is something wrong with the plane? But Sierra knew better. This wasn't turbulence. This was accountability. She felt her phone vibrate again. It was a text from her father. "Update Delta's VP of Customer Experience has been briefed. FAA requested we hold your flight while they investigate mid-air based on civil rights protocol. You are not alone." Sierra stared at the message. The words sank in slowly, like ink into cloth. The FAA was involved. That was unheard of mid-flight. She showed the message to the woman beside her. The woman read it twice, then nodded with a faint smile. "Good." Sierra didn't smile. Not yet, but something in her posture shifted. She wasn't just bracing anymore. She was standing, even while sitting. Another buzz, another message. Also, the airline's CEO has been notified. Your name is on their radar now. In a good way. They've already begun checking internal communications from the crew. Sierra exhaled. She could feel her pulse slowing. Just slightly. Not from relaxation, but from resolve. She had never expected this flight to become a stage. She had only wanted to get to orientation, to begin the next chapter of her life. But maybe this was part of it too. Maybe this was what stepping into something bigger than herself looked like. The captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continued patience. We have now received clearance to begin final descent into Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened as we prepare to land. The plane tilted gently forward, dipping beneath the clouds. The runway approached fast now. Sierra sat still, eyes forward, hands folded. The passengers around her began to gather their belongings, stretching necks and shoulders, chatting softly about dinner plans and connections. But not her. She was listening. She was watching. As the wheels touched down with a heavy thud, a strange hush settled. Even as people applauded lightly habit, relief, celebration, there was a quiet beneath the surface. Then came the voice that changed everything. This is your captain again. I would like to ask that all passengers remain seated after we arrive at the gate. We have been instructed to hold deplaning until airport security and federal authorities board for an official review. Please do not retrieve your carry-ons until we give the all clear. A beat of stunned silence. Then whispers. Dozens of them. Confused, nervous, curious. Federal authorities. What's going on? Sierra didn't move. The plane taxied to the gate, slower than usual. Outside the window, airport staff bustled past, but Sierra spotted something that made her breath catch. Two individuals in black suits, standing just beyond the jet bridge. One held a clipboard, the other wore a badge. Her chest rose slowly. This was really happening. The plane stopped. The ding of the arrival bell rang out, but no one stood. Everyone waited. The door opened, and the officers stepped on board. They did not rush. They did not yell. They moved with calm authority, heads scanning the cabin, speaking briefly to the lead flight attendant, who was now Tess, not Cynthia. After a short exchange, the officers walked slowly down the aisle. And then they stopped, right beside seat 26F. The woman beside Sierra straightened, ready to intervene. But one of the officers spoke gently. Miss Sierra Brooks. Sierra looked up. Steady. Yes, we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an incident reported by multiple witnesses and crew members. You are not in any trouble, but your voice matters right now. Sierra stood slowly. Her knees were strong. She looked around the cabin. So many faces. Some curious, some supportive, a few uncertain, but her own was clear. This wasn't just her seat anymore. It was her stand, and she was ready. Sierra walked down the narrow aisle with calm steps that betrayed the storm building inside her chest. Her heart pounded, but her shoulders stayed steady. The weight of 100 eyes followed her, some wide with curiosity, others burning with quiet support. She passed rows of passengers who just moments ago were strangers. Some gave her small nods as she walked by. Others couldn't quite meet her eyes. That was okay. She wasn't walking for their approval. She was walking for something far bigger. At the front of the plane, the two officers stepped aside to let her pass. One of them, A tall black woman with braided hair tied into a low bun gently touched Sierra's arm before speaking. "My name is Agent Rachel Niles. This is Agent Coleman. We're here to ensure your rights are protected and that the complaint filed is properly reviewed under federal guidelines. There is a private space just off the jet bridge where we'll be speaking. If you'd prefer, we can have a witness or crew member present." Sierra nodded. "I'm okay to speak." The door of the plane felt like a threshold. Behind it, the stifling air of tension and silence. Ahead of it, a hallway filled with possibility, and for once, maybe accountability. As she stepped off the aircraft, the air hit her like a wave, not just cooler, but freer. Her lungs expanded in a way they hadn't for hours. She followed the officers into a nearby room off the boarding gate, where a pair of simple chairs and a table had been set up. It wasn't an interrogation room. No mirrors, no recording lights, just space to speak. "Please," Agent Niles said. "Have a seat." Sierra sat. "We've reviewed preliminary witness reports and the internal alert filed mid-flight. Before we go further, I want you to understand that you are under no obligation to answer anything. You are not under suspicion of wrongdoing." Sierra met her gaze directly. "I want to speak. Take your time. Start from where you feel it began." Sierra exhaled, then she began. She told them everything. The moment she asked for orange juice, Cynthia's dismissive tone, the way she had been cut off and told they were out, even though others had received it moments before, the escalation, the public warning, the accusation of being confrontational. She described how she had called her father, the moment the cabin changed, how other passengers had come to her defense, how Tess had supported her. She did not raise her voice once, but her words carried weight. They came with pauses, with breath, with truth. She was not trying to perform. She was trying to be heard. When she finished, Agent Coleman leaned forward. "Can you recall the exact words Cynthia used when she approached you the second time?" "Yes," she said. "We've received a report that you were confrontational and refused to follow instructions. Then she told me there would be consequences when we landed." Agent Niles nodded, taking a few notes. "Did you raise your voice at any point?" "No. I stayed calm. I asked for orange juice, then accepted water when she refused again. That was it. And prior to that moment, did you have any negative interaction with her?" "No, it was my first time speaking to her directly." Agent Niles exchanged a glance with her colleague. Then she looked back at Sierra. "I want to thank you for your clarity. Your composure is remarkable. I also want to share something with you." She opened a folder and slid out a single sheet of paper. "This is a printout of the initial flight log from the crew. Cynthia filed a note stating you were hostile and uncooperative. But this contradicts not only passenger witness reports, but also a statement submitted by another flight attendant, Tess McAllister, who describes you as respectful and calm." Sierra's jaw tightened. She tried to label me. With one moment, yes. And unfortunately, that happens more often than it should. But the difference today is that people stood up, and you spoke clearly. That changed the equation. What happens now? The FAA has opened a formal inquiry into the incident. Cynthia Harrow will be removed from duty pending investigation. If necessary, your testimony may become part of a broader case. Will she be fired? That depends on what they find in her prior records, on what policies she violated. But accountability is in motion, and that's because of you. Sierra looked down at her hands. They were still, for the first time all day. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome. And if there's anything else you recall, even small details, please share them. Every part matters. Actually, there was one more thing." She described the moment during drink service when she politely questioned the missing orange juice, the subtle way Cynthia's face had changed, the tone that carried no curse, no slur, but still sliced deep. Agent Niles listened carefully, then nodded. "Intent is hard to measure, but patterns are not. You've helped us see one clearly." As they finished the conversation, Sierra stood slowly. Her legs didn't feel heavy anymore. "You okay?" Agent Niles asked. "I think I'm starting to be—" As she stepped back out into the terminal, she was greeted by a surprise. The woman who had sat beside her during the flight stood just outside the door. She held a small suitcase and a warm smile. "I figured you might not want to walk through that gate alone." Sierra's throat caught. "Thank you. You were brilliant in there. I heard a little bit from one of the officers. You should be proud. I'm still kind of in shock. You'll feel the weight later. But for now, just know this. You did something important today." Sierra nodded, blinking back emotion. They walked together into the terminal, past the people waiting to board other flights, past the people looking at screens and phones and coffee cups. Just two women, one young, one older, both changed by the same sky. She could hear her phone buzz again. It was her father. "Call me when you're safe and seated. You were incredible. The world saw you. Proud of you beyond words." Sierra tapped the message and saved it. She didn't need to respond yet. Some moments deserved quiet. And as she walked toward baggage claim, her steps light, her spine tall, she realized she was carrying something new. Not just her backpack, but her story. And it was just beginning. The air outside the terminal felt different, heavier with summer heat, but also clearer, as if something had finally broken open. Sierra stepped through the sliding glass doors and into the thick, humid breath of Atlanta. A quiet breeze teased at the edges of her shirt, and for the first time all day, she welcomed the noise. Cars honking, announcements blaring, families shouting greetings. It was messy and alive and real. She clutched her duffel tightly against her side as she made her way to the rideshare pickup zone. Her phone vibrated again. "You good?" That was her father? Yes. Talking to the agents helped. "It's a lot, but I'm okay." She paused, then typed again. "Thank you for believing me before anyone else did. Always. We'll talk when you get to the hotel. They sent over the info just now. Looks nice. You didn't have to." "Of course I did. My daughter's first night in a new city deserves comfort. Plus, I needed to know you were somewhere safe." As she waited for her ride, she glanced around. Travelers milled about, some flustered, others calm. A man nearby balanced a sleeping toddler on one shoulder and a car seat in the other hand. Two young women in matching college hoodies laughed over milkshakes. Life kept moving, but Sierra had changed. Her body still remembered the hum of the plane, the press of the seatbelt, the dryness of that water in the plastic cup. She remembered Cynthia's voice like a sharp chord, discordant and cutting. But she also remembered Tessa's quiet resistance, the woman beside her who spoke up, the agents who listened, the text from her dad, the way truth could echo louder than lies if enough people stood with it. A car pulled up, a silver hybrid with a Delta sticker on the side and tinted windows. The driver stepped out, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard and a warm smile. "Sierra Brooks. That's me. Your father arranged this ride personally. I'm Terrence. He gave me strict instructions to get you there safely and to tell you you're a warrior." Sierra laughed despite herself. "That sounds like him." He opened the door and helped her with her bag. The drive was quiet at first. Sierra stared out the window as the city passed by in blurs of concrete and green. Her hotel wasn't far. 15 minutes, maybe 20, but it felt like a ride between two versions of herself. After a few minutes, Terrence spoke. "You mind if I ask you something?" "Sure. Was that you?" "The incident on the plane they're talking about, Sierra's breath caught. Already I just saw a post. Someone recorded the captain's announcement and shared it. There's a lot of speculation online. I figured it might be you. It was... You okay? I think so." "It was. A lot." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes the sky shakes us up for a reason. Not always fair, but sometimes necessary." They rode in silence for a moment more. "You handled it with grace." "That's not easy at your age." "Thanks. I just didn't want to be quiet about it." And that's how change starts. When they pulled up to the hotel, Terrence helped her out of the car and handed her the bag. "If you need anything, your father has my number. And if you ever need a reminder, remember this. Your dignity doesn't ask for permission. It stands, even when others try to sit it down." Sierra blinked back emotion. "Thank you, Terrence, for everything inside the hotel." The concierge handed her a key without needing much explanation. "Top floor, quiet corner suite, courtesy of your very protective father." The room was more than she expected. 2 queen beds with crisp white sheets, a wide window that overlooked the skyline, a welcome basket with fruit and sparkling water. She sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled slowly. Safe. She pulled her shoes off, dropped her backpack to the floor, and finally let the stillness in. Her phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't just her father. There were new messages from classmates, a friend from summer debate camp, even her AP English teacher. "Saw your name trending. Are you all right? I knew it. You always carried yourself with strength. I'm proud of you. Sierra, if you need someone to talk to or write something for the paper, let me know." She opened social media and hesitated. Then she typed, "I never thought my first day in a new chapter would look like this. I'm still processing. But to anyone who's ever been made to feel small for asking to be treated fairly, you're not wrong. You're not alone. And sometimes, speaking up opens a door, even if your voice shakes." She hit post. Within minutes, likes and comments began to flood in. But Sierra didn't scroll. She curled up against the headboard, pulled the blanket over her legs, and just sat. The weight of the day clung to her, but so did a strange peace. Down below, Atlanta shimmered in the dark. She closed her eyes and whispered the sentence her father always said before every big moment in her life. "You are not what they say. You are what you do next." And Sierra knew what came next. She would not just move past this. She would build from it. She would make sure others saw themselves in her story and knew they mattered too. The next morning, the sun spilled softly across the hotel room, painting the white sheets in honeyed gold. Sierra stirred, eyes fluttering open slowly. For a brief moment, she forgot everything. It felt like any other morning in a quiet space, with the faint buzz of city life somewhere far below and the gentle hum of the AC above. But as she reached for her phone and saw the notifications stacked on her screen, it all came flooding back. Her post from the night before had been shared thousands of times. She scrolled slowly at first, not out of vanity, but out of disbelief. Comments came from people she had never met. "You're brave. Thank you for speaking up. My daughter is 15. I showed her your story this morning. You've given her something powerful. This is why we keep pressing. Dignity isn't negotiable." Sierra sat up, heart both heavy and light. It was strange to be seen, not for a dance video or a trend, but for something raw, something real. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Room service, breakfast delivery. She hadn't ordered anything. Opening the door, she found a hotel staff member holding a silver tray and an envelope with her name on it. She accepted both with a thank you and returned to the small table by the window. Inside the envelope was a short, handwritten note. "Saw your story. Thought you might need something warm this morning. Keep being the light." Front desk staff. Sierra opened the tray. A full breakfast scrambled eggs, turkey sausage, sliced fruit, warm biscuits, and a tiny jar of strawberry jam. She smiled and shook her head gently. Kindness, unexpected and unprompted, could feel like a hug you didn't know you needed. As she ate, she pulled up her email. There were messages waiting from outlets she recognized, news organizations, podcasts, campus publications. "We'd love to interview you about your experience. We believe your voice is powerful and important. Would you be open to telling your story on our platform?" She paused before responding to any of them. She wasn't interested in headlines. She didn't want to become a symbol. She wanted change, the kind that outlived attention spans. She called her father. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." She smiled. "Been up since 5. Couldn't sleep. My phone's been vibrating nonstop. People are paying attention. I know. It's a little overwhelming. That's why I called. To remind you, you decide what comes next. You owe no one a performance, not even the public. I know. But I think I want to do something with this. Not just talk. Build." Her father paused, then said something that took her breath away. "You already have." They talked for another 15 minutes. About truth, about legacy, about being young and black and told to be silent in the face of disrespect, and about the weight that came with choosing not to be. When they hung up, Sierra sat still for a moment longer, then opened her laptop. She started writing, but not a post, not a reply. She began a document titled The Sky Seat Project. At the top, she wrote, "For every young person who's ever been told to shrink so others could feel tall, may your voice be the seatbelt when the world gets turbulent." She outlined her idea an online platform where people could share experiences of discrimination in travel spaces, anonymously or with their names, a resource hub, a space for education, a database to track patterns, to inform policy. She didn't know what it would become, but she knew what it could be. An archive of voices, a tool for change, a way to say we are here, we saw it, we remember. By early afternoon, she had sketched out a mission statement, a submission form, and 3 possible partnerships with advocacy groups her dad had helped her identify. Then her phone rang again. It was Tess. "Hi. I hope this isn't too forward. I asked the corporate rep if I could reach out. They said yes." Sierra blinked. "No, it's okay. It's good to hear from you. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been a flight attendant for almost 7 years. I've seen things I regret staying silent about. But yesterday, you made me remember why I joined this job in the first place. To care, to serve, to stand up." Sierra's throat tightened. "Thank you for standing up when it counted. There's more. I just got word." Cynthia has been placed on indefinite suspension. The airline has opened a larger review. They're also updating their crew training protocol based on what happened. Wow. That's fast. It's overdue. But it's because of you. Sierra looked out the window again. The skyline shimmered in the afternoon light, but her reflection was what she saw. A girl with tired eyes, but a steadier heart. "I'm working on something," she said. "A project to collect these stories, not just mine. That's powerful. Let me know how I can help." "I mean that." They said goodbye, and Sierra returned to her laptop. The document stared back at her like an open runway. She began typing again. She didn't flinch when the door knocked next. It was a delivery, another envelope. This time, the card inside read, "Miss Brooks. The president of Delta Airlines would like to personally speak with you this evening. We have arranged a secure video call at your convenience." Sierra exhaled slowly. She was no longer just a passenger. She was part of something larger now. And whatever turbulence came next, she was ready. The hotel room dimmed as twilight pushed through the windows. Sierra sat at the desk, the glow of her laptop screen reflecting faintly in her eyes. Her pulse was steady, but the moment felt bigger than anything she'd prepared for. The secure video link had been sent via encrypted email just an hour earlier. Her father had reviewed the language, double-checked the permissions, and then simply said, "This is your call. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. But if you do choose to speak, speak from your center." Sierra had nodded, not trusting herself to respond. She took a sip of the chamomile tea that the hotel staff had brought up earlier, fingers curled tightly around the ceramic cup. She had pulled her hair back and changed into a soft navy blue top. Nothing flashy, just her. At exactly 7:00 p.m. She clicked the link. The screen flickered, then stabilized. The man who appeared looked younger than she'd expected. Maybe in his 40s, with a clean-shaven face, tailored suit, and clear, attentive eyes. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. His presence was direct, not cold. "Sierra Brooks." "Yeba." "Sir, good evening. My name is Malcolm Frazier. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Delta Airlines. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I understand this has been a difficult 48 hours for you." "It has been. Let me begin by saying I'm sorry. What happened aboard Flight 782 does not reflect the values of our airline, nor the treatment any customer, especially a young woman, should experience under our care. The moment we reviewed the captain's report and the internal statements, we recognized a failure in both execution and culture." Sierra nodded slightly. She appreciated the acknowledgement, but she had come prepared with more than emotions. "Mr. Frazier, I understand that you're apologizing personally, and I appreciate it. But this wasn't just about one moment. This wasn't just one crew member. This was about the feeling I had when I realized no one was going to stop it until I called my father, until the power dynamic changed." His expression shifted, not defensive, reflective. "You're right. That gap, the one between incident and action, is one we failed to bridge in real time. And that has consequences. For our passengers, for our crew, for our reputation. That's why I'm speaking with you directly." He paused, then continued, "I want to be honest about what we've done so far. Cynthia Harrow has been suspended pending termination review. The other crew members on board have been interviewed, and based on your testimony, as well as witness accounts, we've launched an internal task force to revise our cultural sensitivity and escalation policies across all domestic flights." Sierra folded her hands. That sounds like a start. But I think you know that training videos and memos aren't enough. He smiled faintly. I do, which is why we'd like to offer something different. We'd like to invite you to be part of that task force, not as a consultant, as a partner. Sierra blinked. I'm 17. Yes. And in 48 hours, your clarity and courage have done more for our internal review process than any board meeting in the last 6 months. You understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of silence. That's something we can't replicate with a title. What would that partnership look like? We'd like to work with you to design a passenger experience protocol, one that centers dignity and escalation de-escalation, especially for young people and communities of color. You'd be helping define what accountability looks like when there's no camera rolling. Sierra took a moment to process. It was one thing to speak up. It was another to be invited into the engine room. I'll need time to think about that, she said carefully. Of course. There's no pressure. Just one more thing. He reached off camera and held up a small item, a black binder embossed with gold letters. This is a new policy draft. It's called the Brooks Protocol, a placeholder name. But we'd like your permission to make it permanent. Sierra stared at the screen. You're naming it after me. He nodded. Because it started with you, and we believe history should remember that. She wasn't sure what to say. Thank you, she finally whispered. That means a lot. After the call ended, she sat there in silence for a long time. The screen went dark. The room around her hummed softly. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars had fallen onto buildings. She looked down at her notebook, still open beside her. Earlier that day, she had jotted down a list of things she wished had happened on that flight. Someone standing up sooner, a clear way to report misconduct, a sense that her calm mattered more than Cynthia's version of events. Now, one by one, those things were starting to form. Her phone buzzed. This time, a different kind of message. It was from a girl she didn't know. Hey, I'm 14. I saw your story online. Something similar happened to me at school. I never told anyone, but seeing you speak up, it made me feel like I could too. Thank you. Sierra read the message 3 times before replying. You're not alone, and your story matters. When you're ready to speak, I'll be here to listen. She set the phone down gently and leaned back in the chair. For the first time, she realized this story had never really been about her alone. It was about the ripple, the echo, one girl, one flight, one call, and now a movement. A week had passed since Flight 782 touched down in Atlanta. 7 days. But to Sierra, it felt like months. Her world had stretched and shifted in ways she never imagined. Her name had appeared in headlines she never expected to be part of. Her voice, once quiet in the back of the plane, was now echoing in rooms where decisions were made. But even as her face appeared in interviews and her words were shared on screens, Sierra kept returning to something much smaller. The moment when the drink cart rolled past her, the first time she felt invisible, the weight of being seen only when accused, the way silence had screamed louder than any shout. She didn't want to become a symbol. Symbols could be flattened. She wanted to remain real, a person, a student, a daughter, a girl who loved writing late at night and organizing color-coded folders for school. A girl who liked blueberry pancakes and old jazz records and calling her dad to talk about nothing in particular. Today, she stood at the Delta Airlines headquarters. Her hands rested against the edge of the conference table as she stared at the large printed mock-up in front of her. The Brooks Protocol, a new model for passenger dignity and crew response. The title was surreal, but what mattered to her were the sections underneath it. Guidelines for youth passenger interaction. Zero tolerance for coded language. Mandatory bias training for senior crew. In-flight escalation procedures with immediate passenger rights documentation. Partnership hotline for real-time incident reporting. It wasn't just a policy, it was a promise. Tess stood beside her, her expression gentle. You changed the air. Sierra. That doesn't happen often. I didn't do it alone. No, but you led with truth, and people followed. The door opened and Mr. Fraser entered. He greeted the room with a quiet confidence and walked straight towards Sierra. We've reviewed the final draft. Legal approved it, operations endorsed it, and our board just voted unanimously. As of this morning, the Brooks Protocol is officially part of our policy across all domestic and international flights. Sierra nodded, her throat tight. Thank you for honoring it. He studied her a moment longer, then smiled. Thank you for writing it. Later that afternoon, Sierra sat in a small garden near the campus of Emory University. She had taken a cab there quietly, needing space, a place away from cameras. She found a quiet bench under a blooming magnolia tree and opened her notebook. She wasn't there to write a speech. She was there to breathe. A little girl passed by with her mother, skipping in pink sneakers. She stopped and looked at Sierra curiously. Are you the girl from the plane? Sierra smiled. I might be. The little girl beamed. My mom said you told the truth. That makes you brave. Thank you. That means a lot. The girl ran off to chase a butterfly, and her mother mouthed a silent thank you across the garden. Sierra turned back to her notebook and wrote just one line. Sometimes turbulence doesn't end with landing, but it always leads to change, if you don't stay seated. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was a message from the FAA. Miss Brooks, we've completed our internal review. Based on the investigation, we will be releasing new federal guidelines for passenger protection and crew accountability. We would like to publicly recognize your contribution. Please let us know how you'd prefer to be acknowledged. Sierra stared at the message and shook her head slowly. She didn't need a plaque. The work was the recognition. Still, she replied, let's do it together, not just with me. Let's bring in other voices, other stories. That night, she boarded a flight home. Same airline, different crew. As she approached her seat, a flight attendant with graying hair and a navy blazer looked up, eyes widening slightly. You're Sierra Brooks, aren't you? I am. The woman placed a hand over her heart. It's an honor. We've all read your story. I wanted to say, thank you. You made me rethink how I greet every single person on this plane. Sierra smiled. That's all I ever wanted. During takeoff, she gazed out the window. The runway blurred beneath her, then vanished. The city lights dissolved into stars. The cabin was quiet, peaceful. She reached into her bag, pulled out a single printed copy of the Brooks Protocol, and tucked it into the seat back pocket in front of her. Not for show, for someone else to find. When the flight landed, Sierra walked off the plane with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to carry her voice wherever she went. Outside the terminal, her father stood waiting, his arms folded, smile wide. You didn't just land a plane, he said as he hugged her. You lifted a system. She laughed into his shoulder. I just wanted orange juice. He stepped back, looked her in the eye, and said, and you got justice instead. She glanced up at the sky. No clouds tonight, just clarity, and somewhere, across thousands of flights, Maybe one more passenger would be treated with kindness. Maybe one more teen girl wouldn't have to choose between silence and survival. Maybe dignity would become policy. And maybe, just maybe, the skies had changed because one girl said no. And then she said more, and the whole world listened. Sierra Brooks didn't shout. She didn't curse. She didn't demand the world to stop. She simply stood up in the most powerful way a young person can by refusing to stay silent. Her story reminds us that racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a name tag. Sometimes it carries a tray. And sometimes it hides behind protocol. But when one girl chooses truth over fear, when she turns humiliation into change, when she whispers justice loud enough for the world to hear systems tremble, the Brooks Protocol is not just a policy. It's a reminder that every seat in the sky carries a story, and every story deserves respect. So to anyone who's ever felt dismissed, silenced, or judged for how they look, how they speak, or where they sit, this is for you. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And yes, your story can change everything. If this story moved you, share it. If it made you think, talk about it. And if you believe in a world where dignity doesn't need to be earned, then like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because we're just getting started. More stories like Sierra's are waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss them.